figure it. Figure it. And that is okay. Here comes. See how cool your icon is? Hello. How are you, Sarah? Hi, Krista. So happy you guys are here today. Okay, everybody can hear me fine? Thank you, Sarah. I love you guys too. And I'm so happy you guys are here with me. It's going to be kind of a little bit empty tonight, but that's okay because maybe some people will catch us on the rewatch. But hello to all my lovely trial junkies and true crime enthusiasts. What we're going to talk about tonight is going to be the death penalty. And I think it's going to be some interesting things for us to think about because I have always, for the last year, I think it's been posted on social media about when there's a death penalty case that's going to be up and when the death penalty is taking place. And so one reason I do that is because I feel that if we're going to have the death penalty, then we should know about it. You know, we need to know about the victim. What was the crime? Was it, bad enough that it deserved the death penalty? Was everything tested? And I think that's a big one because a lot of death penalty cases you're going to find have been there for a long time. So these people have been on death row sometimes 25 or more years. In fact, recently there was one in Louisiana. He was 82 and he was supposed to be executed this year. He passed away before they could get him on the rolls, I guess, or whatever they call it. On they had signed his death warrant, but he passed. Hey, fella, so happy you're here to join us, darling. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about is if we're gonna have it, let's make sure everything's tested because we hear of cases where people, they come from a prison sentence where they were there for life and all of a sudden you hear that they've been exonerated, they were the wrong person, and they get out. Well, if the death penalty, there's no coming back from that. But, if they carry that out, you're gone. So we have to think about that. Is it something that we should do? If we do it, are we checking everything? Are we doing it properly? So let's go ahead and see what we can talk about. And I want to hear what you guys think. I really do, because this is a safe place for all of us to share our opinions. We're not all going to agree, and that's cool. One thing, since the death penalty there's been 186 inmates who have been exonerated since 1972. And that's something to think about. That's 186 people that could have, been deleted. And one reason we're talking about it is we're starting to see a really fast speed of these death penalty cases coming up. And it's because there was an executive order signed on January 20th. And that order tells us that capital punishment is essential for deterring and punishing the most heinous crimes against American citizens. And let's stop and think about that. Okay, does it really deter other criminals? JD did a really cool video on the different prisons around the world, and it talked about some of the prisons that have the less, can't can't think of the term now, guys. You know me and the English language sometimes. I trip over my own tongue, but uh, the rates of people reoffending, okay? And the ones that have the least are some of the prisons in like Norway and Sweden, where criminals are treated like human beings, you know? I'm not saying all of them should be, because, you know, we have those, especially people that commit crimes that are so bad against little kids. And those are the ones that, you know, JD always yells wood chipper at this time, because when you victimize children, it is something to think about. But in this executive order, he said that there's a historic precedent of the US, and it continues to have a lot of support. We're going to address that. Does it really have the support of the public? It also addresses concerns of some officials who have, you know, stopped with the death penalty. We have the last administration that he signed some orders to pardon some people. The Attorney General, Merrick Garland, he had put a pause on all federal DP cases in June of 2021, and saying that they were going to review everything that had happened during the last administration. And one of the things they cited was all those people that had been exonerated. So they thought, you know, let's put a pause. We'll see what's going on. The new administration is not happy about that. They're upset that there are also other politicians in certain states. We've had states that have stood up and said, we're pausing our DP cases. We're not going to follow through. They're just paused. So what's going to happen there? Now, the ones that were commuted, okay, it was 38 out of 40 of the federal prisoners. Some of them are terrible rapists, people that harm children, a lot of people that delete people that are on that list that were commuted to life. It's not like they let them go, but they just said you're going to be you know, there for life now. So there was only 2 that they didn't, and I know one of those was the Boston bomber that, you know, during the marathon. He's one that was not commuted. He's still on death row. Now, section 2 of this form that he filled out, or executive order, he is ensuring that the capital punishment will take place. And the AG now, the lovely Pam Bondi, is supposed to make sure that it happens. He especially wants anyone that has deleted a police officer, and there will be any illegal alien or immigrant without legal status that has committed a capital crime is going to be automatically on death row, as far as he's concerned. Okay. And it also, this is the thing that got me, and I really tried to understand this. And if anybody knows about it, let me know. You're right, Follett. The federal DP in the state is different, because I know in Virginia in 2021, they put an end to the DP statewide. And that was due to a case that happened with someone that was mentally challenged. And if I'm not mistaken, the last name was Atkins, I think, versus Virginia. But what this new thing that's coming out is they want to see if they can do this parallel checking so that the AG can go in and double check on the cases that were pardoned by the last administration, and see if they can go ahead and charge them statewide, or I mean federally. So that kind of surprised me, because it's kind of like getting a bite of the apple a second time. It's like, okay, they were charged, they had the DP, but now we're commuting it, or putting them there for life. And now you're going to turn around and try and find state charges so you can turn around and give them the DP statewise. Let's see, Sarah, what I don't understand is why, when someone is found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, why do they sit in prison for decades? Okay, well, I'll tell you why they sit around. Because they can appeal. They get a chance to appeal, and the appeals, it is a huge process. It takes years to go through all their appeals, and they have new things that come up to get those appeals. Okay. And when they're doing their appeals, one thing we found, because a lot of these cases, you're bringing up how many years they sit there. A lot of these cases have been there for 20, 25, even 30 years waiting. Well, if they were to rush in, like there's a recent case here in Texas that the gentleman got a stay. I didn't have the information covered in here, but let me quick pull up his name. It's Leonard Wood versus Texas. And according to the information, the crime happened. Let me quickly pull that up. I thought I had everything there. It was in 1987. They suspect him of being the desert serial killer. And there were 6 victims, young girls and women from the age of 14 up to 24. And they found partially buried girls, and that's how, and then they said that because someone had seen him with one of the girls, that's how he became a suspect. Okay. So we're talking about 1987. This gentleman's now 67. Well, he finally got the rights to run the DNA, because as we all know, as true crime aficionados here, we know how DNA has changed. It's gotten better. Well, some of these older cases, hey, Matt, good to see you. Some of these older cases, the judges are refusing to let the current DNA be tested. In this case, this Leonard Wood, they ran the DNA, right? David Leonard Wood, I'm sorry. It didn't match. And the judge was like, excuse me, how many times did you run it? They said 3 times. What do you mean it doesn't match? That's a problem. So his attorney is saying you have very little evidence that he did delete 6 people. So we need to find out. Everything needs to be tested. They should not hold back when you're talking about a DP case. The Gary Ridgway. Okay, you found where the girls were found. Yeah. Okay, yeah. And you're right, Sarah. And how many of those cases have the victims finally gotten their names because of DNA? Sadly, when he was committing most of his crimes, we didn't have the DNA to catch him. Now that they finally caught these people, it's like they want to put them in a shoebox and ignore it. But here's the thing, you guys. If this person, let's say, didn't commit the crime. Now, Gary Ridgway, we know they've got hit. They had the evidence on him. But if they didn't commit the crime, and you go ahead and the death penalty is taken, the person's deleted, so, and he's not the right person, someone got away with it. That means that criminal is still out there. How many more victims were there that weren't found? Oh, he's back in King County right now? Okay. Yeah. See, that's it with some of these serial killers is they try to get more names out of them. And one way now that we can catch them is DNA, because if they can get the items that were found with the victim, you know, we can then close these cases and we won't have so many open cases. So, it is important. Sometimes we think, well, you got them, just rush them through the system and that's it. Now this guy, this is David Wood. I don't know if he's guilty or not. They need to do more testing. They need to double check things. If he's guilty and he deleted 6 women from the age of 14 to 24, okay. But if he's not, who did it? These girls and women need justice, and that's what we want to see. And so the order that the administration filed calls for the AG to check into the conditions that those 37 that got their sentences commuted from DP to life, to make sure they're being held in the conditions that are consistent with the monstrosity of the crimes and threats they pose. So what? We're going to dig a big hole and put them in? That really threw me, because it's just like a revenge thing, right? These people got away from me giving them the DP, so I want to make sure that they're being treated badly. I'm not saying they're right or wrong, the people that they got their sentence, commuted, but that's a little petty for me. If maybe they need to get rid of the pardon power. I don't know. Maybe nobody should be able to do that. Something to think about. So now that's what the AG is going to do. And she's going to go in there and check and make sure if they can go ahead and charge them for a state case, And he even wants them to check and make sure that the states that use the lethal injection can get the drugs. Now that's something to think about, because there is a lot of these pharmacies that want nothing to do with this, And so, let's see, Sarah, what do you say? Easy to hide in all the, yeah, you're right. In some of those states, I think of what is it up in Canada with a lot of the First Nation women and girls that are missing, what they call the Trail of Tears, that highway that goes up there toward Vancouver. It's all woods. I see Moo in the background. She's checking things out. So, that's just it. A lot of these people don't get found until years later. Yeah, that was the Moo. She was taking a nap, the little brat, but she saw some of the other cats, so she has to go check it out. We have 3 states where the governor has put a stop to capital punishment for now. And that's California, Oregon, and let's see. I can't even see that large as it is on the map. Isn't that sad? Can you see that, Doc?
What, California?
No, California, Oregon. Is it Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay, those are the 3 states that have put a pause, So one of the things that the administration wants the AG to do is to go toward the Supreme Court and find out what laws are stopping the death penalty from being carried out statewide. So right now, it's just like the expression of intent. There's no specific, laws that they're saying, hey, this is what we're going to do to the Supreme Court so that all the states have to do this. But the administration wants it looked into. Hey, Aaron, thanks for coming in. We love you. And we appreciate you popping in. Tell the Squeege hi. I will probably be checking up on you guys later after he's done tonight too. So, It's just the intent. And one thing is that could end up being affected is like we were talking about Fowler, that other case in Virginia versus Atkins in 2002, because that was someone, with the intellectual disabilities. Hey, Doc, Aaron sending you love.
Love you too.
Aw, hey, Krista, we love you too, sweetheart. So, and that's something to think about, is if they go in and change the Supreme Court's laws or go after them, what's going to happen to the states that no longer, you know, follow the DP, the death penalty? There are even Republican lawmakers or the GOP in Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Ohio that have bills that are trying to abolish the DP. So it's not always a one-sided thing, one side over the other, because I hate the politics. So, but we're just talking about, what's going to happen to the death penalty. And there's a great map that shows the states that do allow it and those that don't. Right now, Georgia has a bill that they're trying to prevent people that have intellectual disabilities. Because when you look into just even, that was something that JD had discussed in one of his videos on the prison system, is that when you have a lot of these prisoners, a lot of them have mental problems. That does not excuse them committing crimes. That's not what I'm saying. You commit crimes, you're going to have to do the time. That's, I totally agree with that. We can't let mental disabilities be an excuse for people to do whatever they want. But at times it does need to be taken into, consideration. So Georgia's one of those that's trying to get a bill passed. Hey, Cresty, my Dune brother, how are you? So the GOP in Oklahoma has issued a bill to pause all of their DP's executions right now. And even to stop them from having the warrant signed, because that's what happens. Okay, you have someone on death row. The governor eventually will sign a warrant saying, okay, all the appeals have been met. It's time. Here we go. This is your date. So Oklahoma is not only pausing the DP, but they're also stopping people from getting a date. Okay. Now, we had a case here in Texas when we were talking about intellectual disabilities last year of a gentleman, last name was Robinson, who was up for the DP for his daughter, and they were trying to say that he had deleted her. Well, what they didn't take into effect was that he had taken her to doctors. She had the flu. They gave her medications that they know that they shouldn't give a child. She got sicker. She eventually passed. And then because of his reaction at the hospital, and also his rich in-laws who did not like him, and he had custody of his daughter because the person he'd had the child with had become an addict. And so they decided that he deserved the DP and he should be charged with murder. He was autistic. His reaction wasn't the same. So they didn't think he was showing enough, sympathy. He wasn't crying enough. So right now, his case is still stayed. He's paused. But with this new executive order being given, I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if, the AG of Texas is going to decide, hey, we're going to go ahead and, put this person up there and get him deleted. Which I personally, on his case, what I've looked into it, I think would be a travesty. There are other cases I've seen that you're just sitting there going, yeah, well, maybe JD's right with his wood chipper. Now, since 2009, there have been 7 states who have abolished the DP. New Mexico, Illinois, Connecticut, Maryland, Delaware, Washington, New Hampshire, Colorado, and Virginia. Okay. Virginia was the one in 2021. They were the last one to do that. We have 20 states with the DP. So you got Alabama and Arizona, Arkansas, California, Georgia, Indiana, Idaho, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nevada, Nebraska, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Wyoming. Also, the federal government, like you guys had brought up, the federal government, like Fala brought up, the federal government and the state, separate entities. So the federal government does do the DP. And also the island of America, Samoa. So, but we know that California, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and Ohio have all put a pause on the DP. So those are the states they have it, but they've paused it. So that's something to think about. And then let's see where. So let's see. Some states, okay, there are states that are thinking of expanding their laws. Oklahoma is considering that any undocumented immigrant that has committed or been convicted of a first-degree murder, eligible DP. Okay. Okay, Matt. So a lot in Connecticut aren't happy with the thought that the DP isn't there. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, Arizona has it, Washington. Yeah. So, and there are states that people aren't happy about it. Now, Iowa and New Mexico, they're considering laws also that the murder of or deletion of a police officer eligible for capital punishment immediately. Florida has enacted some laws requiring automatic, capital punishment of undocumented immigrants convicted of the capital crimes. Okay. California has also done some weird things with their juries. We're now on a DP case. It doesn't have to be unanimous. And people kind of feel like that's underhanded. I don't know how you all feel. But that's not, the last one to get it in Florida, I would be Wade Wilson. And we've seen way too much of that dude. He is just sad. Just a really sick, twisted little puppy there. Now, execution methods. Something to think about, guys. Idaho passed a bill making the firing squad the primary method of DP. This is a lot of what's going on with the Kohlberger case, Brian Kohlberger, right now, is because his, hey, Moo, she's in the background trying to see what her sisters are doing. His attorney, and I can't think of her last name right now, but she is, saying he shouldn't get the DP. The firing squad is cruel and unusual, very upset about that. Hey, Racy, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. The Moo's here. She's going to investigate everything. So Idaho has instituted the firing squad. Arizona is considering it. So that's interesting to think that they're going to consider it. And then we've actually, let's see, what other states do we have? Let's see, Arkansas, Nebraska, and Ohio are also weighing bills for the nitrogen hypoxia as an execution method. So the gas. And that one, I don't know. That one is really pretty cruel. Matt's worried about Kentucky becoming California. Okay. Arizona is beautiful, but I think Sarah will tell you, Matt, it is hot. um, but one of the things that was interesting is, remember, in the executive order, it was said that it has the support of the people, the DP. Now there is a Gallup poll that only 53% of Americans support it. Now we know polls, polls can be, they take just a certain amount of people. So I'm not sure if I believe all the polls, but that's what we have. Okay, Racy thinks if we have the DP, we should do it right away and not just do live. But other has scared yeah, see, and that's the problem. I don't know if you were here earlier, Racy, but we talked about the case here in Texas, David Leonard Wood, that just got a stay because they think he's a serial killer, killed 6 women from age 14 to 24. But when they finally got the agreement to retest the DNA, they didn't find his. That's a problem. And there have been 186 cases of the DP that have been exonerated. So, and that's since 1972. But still, that's 186 lives. Now, they said, so it's the lowest number of Americans since the early 70s that are supporting the DP. They said 81% of the GOP is behind it, with 32% of the other side. So, take that for what it is. Sometimes I think it depends on if you've been a victim of crime. Sometimes I wonder if they should not take what the family thinks a little more seriously. Now, they do say that the death sentences have dropped from 316 that were given in 1996 down to only 26 in 2024. Racy, yeah, for every one person that is innocent, it's bad. So it's wrong. Yeah. And that's something to think about. We do hear those crimes that we think are so terrible that it's like, this deserves it. But there are others that you wonder, I don't know. So the state's logistical challenges obtaining the lethal injections and even finding medical personnel to be on hand to give it. So that's something to think about. Do they even have the proper medical personnel that could administer it? Because there have been cases where things have gone wrong, especially with lethal injection. You would think that would be one of the easier ones. In some states, they have the 3 different drugs that they use, and in some, they only use one. And so there have been some terrible instances where, it's been pain and suffering. I'm not here to say if the person deserves it or not. For some of the GOP, it really messes with the religious conservatives, because they say, hey, the sanctity of life. If we're going to say that abortion is wrong and we're going to turn around and delete, someone else, is that right? So there is conflict. It's not just one-sided. It makes everybody think. And then it says the cost and concerns and about the deterrent effect also comes into play. Like Racy said, from the alternate point of view, if you let these people just sit there for 20, 25, 30 years, think of the money that costs. So that's something to think about. There was a GOP bill in Indiana and Oklahoma that tried to get a bill that said that anyone that either got an abortion or performed one could be given the first-degree murder and eligible for the DP. You know, thankfully that did not pass. And that's something to think about. I mean, if, I'm not saying abortion's right or wrong. That's not for me to judge, what somebody does. But to think that someone that gets one or someone that, gives somebody one, that they would get the DP, that's kind of getting a little bloodthirsty there. Something to think about. But the one drug that phenobarbital, that's the one that when they only use that, it can cause a lot of pain and suffering. The other method that they use, I think it's Florida. I could be wrong, but they use a drug that is supposed to relax the person. Then it's, I think, one that's supposed to kind of knock it out, and then another that's supposed to cause deletion. So, but the ones that just want to use the one drug, they said, that doesn't always work. And so that's something to think about. Matt, yeah, Arizona is far from the ocean. You are correct. Now, Tennessee's protocol is they removed the requirement. Now, this is interesting, that the drugs come from a licensed pharmacist. So ask yourself, where are they getting the drugs? If they're not going through a pharmacy, how are they getting the drugs to delete people? I mean, do we have somebody on the street making a connection? Krista, you're right. It's to soothe, relax, and then stop the heart. You're right. But I don't know. To think that, they no longer have to even bother with, going through a pharmacy, you wonder where they're getting it from. Now, the administration wants to expand capital punishment, especially for drug traffickers. Okay? That's the big thing. We got to get rid of them. And yet, Ross Ulbricht, who was convicted of conspiracy to commit drug trafficking because he ran the Silk Road, there are deaths tied to the drugs he let pass through there. He got a pardon for drug trafficking. So that kind of, that doesn't add up. If you're going to say this is for this reason, then it applies to all. It doesn't, hey, you have a family that has money or position or something, so, we're going to pardon you. But, the guy down here, we caught him, he's going to the DP. So let's think about that and where that goes. We also have had 11 deletions this year with the DP. And, like I said, there was one that the one guy's been stayed. Another guy in Louisiana was 82 and he passed away before they could get the paperwork signed. So otherwise we would be up to, 13. On March 7th, this is Brad Sigmon. He was the first inmate in South Carolina, in the United States, that used the firing squad, okay, in 15 years. I think we remember Gary Gilmore. That's one of the biggest cases. They did a movie about it. Tommy Lee Jones was in it. He played Gary Gilmore. But anyway, yeah, so he was scared of the lethal injection because in South Carolina, there had been some cases of them being in a lot of pain, and it hadn't gone very well. Now, what did Brad do to deserve to be on death row? Well, he was convicted of murdering or deleting. That's so hard to remember. his girlfriend Rebecca's parents, David and Gladys Lark, brutally with a baseball bat. He had spent him and Rebecca had broken up. They had a mobile home on her parents' property, and he was kind of a loser. And so she broke up with him and moved in with her parents. And so he stayed up with a friend doing drugs, cocaine, and drinking all night. And he told him that he was going to go get Rebecca. So he got to her parents' house, and he took a baseball bat to her parents. Now, he went between the two of them. One was in the front room, and one was, if I remember correctly, she was in her bedroom. And he just kept going between them as he was, deleting them. And it was brutal and disgusting, and what those poor people went through. And then when Rebecca got home, he kidnapped her because he had decided that he was going to delete her and then himself, of course. But as they were driving, she jumped out of a moving vehicle. She didn't know if her parents were still living, but she jumped. And of course, he shot at her, and I think he shot her in the foot, but she got away. And so then there was a manhunt for him, and it took him a week or so to find this guy. And when they finally got him, then he went through his trial and he got the DP. So he chose the firing squad because of, in South Carolina, they do have the electric chair, but that scared him. And then he had heard terrible things about the lethal injection. So he decided he'd go with, the firing squad. And then his attorney, Gerald Bo King, he said it was one of the most violent and horrific deaths he had seen. Okay, let's see. Matt, states have ways to get the medications from pharmaceutical companies directly. I'm not completely sure, but I believe they can get them from the State Department of Health. That would be a good question, Matt. I don't know. I know they say that so many companies want nothing to do with it, because usually what a state will put out is they put out a report saying how they handle the DP. Okay. They usually will list the medications or whatever means they're using. And a lot of these states are not putting all the information out anymore because they're hiding it. They don't want it to be out there. So that's something to think about, where are the medications coming? And that's why the executive order, they want to make sure that the AG of the US makes sure that these people get the lethal medications to help them if they're having trouble. Because I remember with Brad Sigmund, one of his requests before his deletion was he had asked how old the drugs were. And the state wouldn't tell him, because I don't know if he was having second thoughts about the firing squad. But the state was like, well, we're not going to tell you. And with the firing squad, they have about, I think it's 3 or 4 volunteers. They're volunteers. And one of them gets a dummy bullet. And then they actually shoot through, there's a wall with like places for the weapon. And they shoot. And so they don't know if they're the one that actually did it. And they keep their identities private because, they would be harassed. But so that's how the firing squad works. The criminal, they put a hood over their face so they don't see it coming. So March 18th was when Jesse Hoffman Jr., they used the nitrogen gas. Now, this was the first execution in a decade that Louisiana actually did. Okay, Krusty, they know if they've got a blank or a live round. Okay. That's good information to know. I have no experience with ammo. As I've spoken before, Doc would never let me have a weapon. It's not allowed. I'm dangerous with a razor just shaving my legs. Not kidding. Right, Doc? I'm the only one that could probably, do something really harmful, and it would all be because I was just shaving my legs. But so this gentleman, Jesse Hoffman, um, like I said, it had been a decade since Louisiana had decided to do this. Now, Alabama has used this method, the nitrogen gas. But the week before his date of deletion, there was a judge, Shelley Dick, that is her name. I'm sorry. I didn't choose it for her, poor thing. I'd be changing mine. Did a temporary block because the ruling that it could cause pain and terror. Now, only 4 inmates have used this method in Alabama. And the reason Louisiana chose this method was because of trouble getting the drugs. So I don't know, Matt, that's a good question, that you'd raised about can't the State Department get the drugs, because the prisons are saying they're having a hard time getting them. So the judge cited witness accounts of the inmate's death as to why she decided to pause it. Describing, because they talked about the conscious terror of the victim or the defendant, that they're, convulsing, struggling for life. Night, fella, you get some sleep. I know you have to get up awful early. Thanks for coming. So the judge wanted to stop the DP, but the AG, Liz Merrill, she disagreed, went to the 5th District Court, because Hoffman's attorney said it was against his religious freedom because he was a practicing Buddhist and he wouldn't be able to do his breathing practices. But they tried to get it up to the Supreme Court, but they denied the request to stay the case. There were some that did want to hear it, but others that said no. So they didn't look at it. Now, what he was on death row for was because Mary Molly Elliott on November 27th, 1996. So here's another case. 1996, it was just, his deletion was just done. So we're talking 29 years. She was an advertising agent. And so she had left her firm that afternoon, that evening, and she walked over to the Sheraton garage because that's where she parked her vehicle. And Mr. Hoffman had been working there for only 2 weeks. So she was supposed to go meet up with her husband for dinner in an hour. She goes over there. This guy pulls a weapon on her. And then he forces her to go to the ATM, and he makes her take out $200. And they have the footage of her at the ATM, and they said she is totally terrified. You can see it on the video. Then he drove her to St. Tammany Parish, where he essayed her. They said, he forced her to walk unclothed, naked, 50 yards on this dirt path that had, rocks, glass, whatever. Night Thala, and to this dock that was set up, a fishing dock. And then he made her kneel and he deleted her. They said that they believe she was laying there in the cold for a few minutes before she finally passed on. And then on Thanksgiving is when they finally found her, and her husband had to identify her. And of course, then Hoffman said, well, I didn't, grape her. She offered herself to me. And he said, I didn't shoot her, because we just struggled over the gun. Of course, the jury didn't believe him. And so that's how he got the DP. he was 18 at the time when he committed these crimes. Um, 18 years old when he did this to her. Can you imagine how terrified this young woman was? Because that would have been the most terrifying night of her life to have gone through this. Okay, Vala, sorry, Virginia got rid of the DP, my best friend's brother. I understand, Vala. It's interesting because there are some victims' families that they would rather have them suffer in prison. It's really a toss up how the families feel, and every family feels different. This is a picture of Molly at her wedding. She's a beautiful young woman. Her husband now said that they've learned to live with the pain of losing such a great human. He's since gone on. I mean, it's been 29 years and he's married and had some children, but you know, she was the love of his life at that time. You know, now he has a new wife that he can't, you know, I don't know how long they've been married, but it's been a while. But, you know, he just said he wanted the finality. He wanted it taken care of. He wasn't sure if that meant, you know, life in prison, if it meant the DP, but he appreciated that Governor Landry, you know, the urgency he decided to put on this final resolution. Because one thing Landry said was that, you know, it is something that as the government we need to do as a promise to keep to the families. We gave this sentence, we need to carry it out. So it kind of goes with what a lot of you guys were saying about how long someone can live, you know. Of course, his family, because he does have a son, you know, they kept saying he's such a changed person. All of these people that end up getting the DP and get deleted, they all have changed. They all become religious. You know, everybody finds religion in jail, it seems. But what was her last day, you know, minutes like? What did she go through? He declined his last meal and he made no final statements. You know, so they said he was 46. So he was 18 when it happened, 46 when he was deleted. They said it took 19 minutes, you know, when he stopped breathing at 6:50 p.m. So, you know, that was one of the recent ones. This was the most recent one. This is Michael Tanzia. This was in Florida. Now, he approached Janet Acosta on April 25th, 2000. So we're talking 25 years ago. She was sitting in her van at lunch, eating and reading a book. You know, how many people have done that? You're on your lunch hour, you're hanging out in your car, you don't want to be around people, you're reading your book, you know, but she had her window down and he approached her. She was by, I guess, the Japanese Gardens in Miami. I don't know where that is, but if someone is familiar with Miami, you might know. And he asked her for a cigarette. As she was distracted, he punched her in the head. Okay. Then he, you know, got control of her, got into the vehicle because he actually lived down in Key West at the time. And so he was up in Miami. I don't know why they never did. I didn't find out why he had been up there, but he'd been up in Miami. And so he wanted to go back down to Key West. So he starts the journey down south. He stops at a gas station after he gets her PIN number because he uses that so he can get money out. And he stops for duct tape, razor blades at the hardware store. And he had threatened her with the razor blades, saying that, you know, he would, you know, harm her terribly if she made a fuss as he bound her up. And then, of course, he SA'd her. You know, that's it. You know, all these creatures do this because, you know, it's a power thing. It really is. And this is her, you know, such a lovely girl. Just on her lunch break, people had such nice things to say about her, and it breaks your heart. And then they said at 6:30 p.m. he made it to Sugar Key, and that's when he decided he was going to delete her. And so then he, you know, strangled her and then concealed the body. he was such a brains maniac here that after he got to Key West, he kept her van and her ATM card using it. Please, you know. So when the police had the van under surveillance after they were able to track it back to her, then they were able to get him. And of course, he quickly, these big bad dudes quickly confess, and led her to where she was. And he did plead guilty to first-degree murder. The defense did try to use his childhood because they said that in the penalty phase, saying that he had been abused. He was an SA victim at the age of 8. His father had physically, emotionally abused him. They said there were multiple mental health diagnoses, bipolar, PTSD, antisocial personality behavior. So, but the jury didn't, they were like, no, and they recommended the DP for him. He did try to take his DP, his guilty verdict back, but they wouldn't let him. So these are just a couple of the cases. There's going to be another one tomorrow night. And I didn't have time to really dig into that one. I will put that one on my social media. But he shot an officer multiple times. And he's supposed to be deleted. Let's see, I'm trying to think of what his name was. Whoops. No. I forgot to use my mouse. I need my mouse for this one. Let's see. His name is Mikal Mahandi, and he's in South Carolina. So that should take place tomorrow. So what are your guys' thoughts? What crimes to you are so bad that the DP is needed? Where do you think mental health is going to play into this? Should the victims' families have a say? A lot of times we'll watch these trials, we'll see these court cases, and they get a plea deal. So, we do want justice for these people. I would love to know, what are your thoughts? Is it something you need some time to think about? Great. That's part of what the conversation is for. This is a nice, safe place where we can all say what we think. No one will ever be put in the position that be told that you're wrong. Unless you're wrong, then I might tell you you're wrong. But no, it's interesting. It really is. So that's where we are tonight. Any comments from anybody? Anybody still with us? Okay. Hey, Krusty. They know on the firing squad because when they fire, one live is randomly loaded. Most are blanks. You can feel that. Okay, I didn't know that. Night Racy. That's interesting. Okay, so they do know. Then that must be something that they just put out there to make them, feel better, to make the public feel better that they don't know. But if you can tell the difference, yeah, why even bother? I know it's a voluntary basis. I know they're in South Carolina, they used prison guards that had volunteered for it. Which is kind of it. What are your guys' thoughts about that? You have a prison guard that's willing to delete someone, because we hear of good prison guards and we hear of bad prison guards. Hey, William, it's okay. I understand. Hey, JD was live tonight. Usually I try and go after him, after he has his live, because I know he likes to eat his protein at the time I usually go live. But for some reason, he was holding off on his protein tonight. I worry about him. But but no, that's something I wonder, because you have the prison guards that they're not nice. Some of them are not nice people at all to get into that field. Some of them do it because they need a job. Some of them do it because they do care. Because on JD's channel, we have heard people that have gotten that job and asked JD for advice on how to be a good prison guard. And he's given wonderful advice on being honest with people and not playing games. And so, what are your thoughts on the prison guards that decide, hey, I want to be on the firing squad? Does it make you kind of a little leery that, ooh, this is the guy that's supposed to be taking care of us, and now he's happily behind a wall and deleting us? We're happy you're here too, William. That's something to really think about, Krusty. I hadn't thought about that one. And I do post, like I said, I usually will always post these to my social media. I'm on X, I'm on BlueSky, and then I have my Facebook group. The Facebook group's been a little weird lately. I've been getting these notifications telling me that some of my posts have been deleted because of content. And it's the same stuff I've been putting up before. And supposedly Facebook was supposed to get rid of their people that check these things. So it's the computer, the AI that's kicking it out. Most of them, I just tell them that they've misunderstood the post and I get them back, but it's odd. Yeah, Krista, I agree. The firing squad does seem kind of old school. It seems like the OK Corral, Sarah can relate to that down there in Arizona, Tombstone, Doc Holliday and the ERP boys coming at you. I don't I can't imagine someone going, hey, and that the guy tomorrow night, he's wanting to go in South Carolina, is wanting to do the firing squad also. Krista, I'm there with you. Like I said, especially cases with children, when they harm children, I have a hard time not saying DP, But like I said, I want to make sure they test everything and all the facts and the item lists are checked. You can't come back from this. That's the only thing I'm saying. Sarah hates the state of Arizona. Sarah, you got to find something you like there because you are there, okay? Find something. Your children or your son's there, okay? That's the good thing about Arizona at this moment. Your son is with you. Pick the one good thing. You're not getting snow. Krista can talk to you about the snow. She's up there in Canada. So, Krista, do they have the DP in Canada? Okay, Krista, get ready. Sarah's on her way. She's coming to Canada. Because I know Canada has a lot of the case I have watched that they don't even get the sentences like they give here in the US. They have a stronger sentencing down here. They're more likely to give life. And I know in Canada, it doesn't seem like they do life as much. I know there is a case where they did have a serial killer that had deleted four, I think it was four of the Native First Nation women, and he did get life. Okay, struggling over the debate with the DP versus and him being autistic. Yeah, I understand that, Krista. I have a hard time with that one too. Not so much. There are those people that you see that have autism. And in the beginning of this case with Brian Kohlberger, they kept talking about how smart he was, and he was doing this criminology case or schooling. and he was also worked for the teacher, and so I have a hard time believing the autism case as strongly as they're trying to play it now. I feel like his attorney is flashing it because she thinks it's popular. That's going to be, he was in court this week and she was trying to pull some more things. I don't know. That's going to be one to watch. I know that. It's supposed to start in August and they expect that case to go through November. And his attorney keeps claiming she still hasn't got to all the or most of the data that the prosecution has sent. It's like, quit coming up with these goofy motions and go do your data, woman. That's what you're supposed to be doing. But it's like every time you turn around, she comes up with something new. First, it was the DP wasn't, shouldn't be legal. Then it was cruel and unusual punishment for the DP. And now the latest thing is the autism that they brought out. And then also there was something else they brought out along with the autism about him having something wrong, that he couldn't have done it as fast as what needed to have been done. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting case. I agree with you. Well, lovelies, thank you for joining me. I love all of you. You all mean so much to me that you came to enjoy the show tonight. If there's a case that you want us to look into, hey, email us. It's trialjunkiesunited@gmail.com. I don't have a problem looking into something. Sarah, my ex was autistic and had multiple TBIs. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Sarah, I agree. He might not be autistic. He could have just used that as a weapon because you do have children that are on the spectrum and he saw how much you cared about them. So that's just wrong that he pulled that. And see, that's the thing with Kohlberg. Yesterday when he was in court, he didn't have the suit, you guys, because every day he's shown up in court in these fancy suits. He didn't have a suit. He was looking, like he was trying to be dumber, I guess. I don't know. It just, for some reason, I feel like it's an act. I don't know. We'll see. I love you all. William, Sarah, Krista, Krusty, Racy came tonight, the alternative point of view, and Fala. So I will see you next week. Well, no, I'll see you Sunday night. Same time, same bat time, same bat station, same bat time. Okay, guys, I love you. And we'll see you Sunday at 8 p.m. Central Time Zone. And like I said, if you have something you want me to look into, let me know. Thank you for supporting us, William. We appreciate it a lot. Good night, everybody. And remember, if you see a mannequin, it's never a mannequin, okay? If you know something, say something. If you hear something, say something. If you know something, say something. We got to watch out for each other. Krusty, enjoy your ride this weekend. Love you all. Good night.